And you do a lot of work with the CR Club, right?
I do.
And I'm Stephanie Matheny. I'm the attorney for the Tennessee Clean Water Network.
I'm James Kane. I'm the president of United Non-Defense.
I'm Patrick Morales, board president with SOCM.
I'm Axel Ringa. I'm Water Quality Committee Chair for the Tennessee Chapter Sierra Club.
This is Trevor Martin with the Tennessee AML program.
And I'm Johnathan Burr. I'm the program manager for the mining regulatory programs for TDEC. I'm going to set you right beside me, and then anytime you didn't catch something or what I'm talking about on the screen, we lost you because you can't see it, speak up. This is really informal. I'm not standing up in front of a room full of people doing a formal presentation. We can do this slide by slide as we go, just fine, okay? So don't hesitate. All right. Okay, hold on. What has happened here is that TCWN had a meeting scheduled with my director to talk about some mining issues coming up here in the future. And Stephanie and I were chatting on the phone about that, and she asked me a question. And I don't remember what the question was, but it led to me saying, you know, I got some data we put together recently for a talk at Tennessee Mining Association conference about the state of water quality and ecological recovery in some of the coal fields areas in Tennessee recently that bears on some of these questions. I think you guys should see the data. And she said, we'd love to. So that's what this is a really informal thing to show you some recent data that may have bearings on how you look at these things, or it may not. One thing I want to make clear to everybody is that I'm not doing this to sell you on a TDEC position. This is not a dog and pony show kind of thing trying to achieve some sort of consensus on an issue. It's just data. And the data can mean what you think it means. I don't think that consensus is something that's necessarily desirable even. Watchdog groups are important to have, and they have to look at it from a different viewpoint and challenge everything from that viewpoint to make sure we're going in the right direction all the time. What's important to me is that when you get data from TDEC, that you understand and have some belief in that data, that it's real and that it's accurate, and that no one's trying to deceive you or snow you in some way. The faith in the science is the place where I think everybody's feet should be resting on the same thing. So that's what I'm hoping for here. What we all decide is the right thing to do with that data, or what that data is telling us, or what direction we should go, is one thing. But we should at least have some base faith in data that comes in, that it does mean something and it can be relied on for something. So I'm going to get Trevor to get the lights there for us, if you will. And at any point you can't hear me, Walt, you speak up, or if you have a question, jump in, okay? All right, the title thing here was Ecological Recovery in Streams Previously Impaired by Mining-Related Activities. Now, I want you to keep in mind who this audience was, which was coal mining companies, OSM, and the consultants that work in that industry. And what I was trying to do with this talk was reinforce for that audience a lot of the things that they don't like that we and SMACRA puts in permits, mostly in pertaining to reclamation activities. And I wanted to show them that there was some good being done from it, and it was succeeding in some of the goals that we'd set forth, and that it wasn't being done for nothing. And try to create a little bit of love fest between them and the SMACRA people that are in the room about how successful they've been. Aren't we great? Let's all go have a drink together. So as I go through this, it may look a little bit like a sales job because of the way it's put together. Keep in mind the audience I was talking to at the time. I wasn't putting this, I would not have put it together this way for you if you were the target audience on that day.
You would have given us a different sales job.
I would have come at you from a totally different angle. All right, there are two main drainages in Tennessee that take 99% of the coal mining influence, both historically and currently. And that's New River that goes into Big South Fork of the Cumberland. Goes through Scott and Anderson and Morgan County, Campbell County. And Clear Fork of the Cumberland, which comes down from Kentucky and swings down through Claiborne and Campbell and goes back into Kentucky to make another arm of the Cumberland River. The data that's on the screen now is conductivity readings that go back to the year 2000 from New River at Stainville. And Stainville is mile 45 point something. It's most of the way up the watershed, and it's closest to the headwaters where a lot of the historical mining occurred. Not so much active permits that we have now. We have a few, but it really more representative of prior decades of pre-permitted mining activity.
Could you just sort of orient that in terms of places we might know?
You know where Highway 116 goes over the mountain and dips down into New River?
Yeah.
This is that bridge on 116 that goes over the main river, right below where Ligas Fork joins the river.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The railroad track here, big bridge, big modern bridge.
Okay.
Now what you see that's unusual about this is the wide range of the conductivity readings. They can be anywhere. One time we're there, it's 150. Other times we're there, it's almost 700. And it fluctuates wildly. The fluctuations are both precipitation related and seasonal. And what that means is it's representative of instability in the upper watershed. It's all the old mine benches, all the old mine spoil, landslides, all these things up there, that water that falls on it soaks through that stuff and comes out, and with it it's carrying the pollutants that it's picked up from these previous historic mine activities. This is not the pattern you would see from permitted outfalls as we do them in Tennessee, where you have these on-bench treatment ponds at high elevation and only discharge in precipitation events. Then you would see purely, when it rains, conductivity would go up, when it's not raining it would go down. But in fact, some of the highest conductivities are at lower flow when it's not raining. And what's that reflective of is all this water that's gone into all this old spoil laying around the watershed and is seeping out the bottoms of it slowly into little streams, then down to the big parent stream.
So you're saying what we're seeing in this slide, the New River in-stream data,
The earlier data.
the earlier data, where we see the spikes, that's likely correlated with not having a rain event?
Some of it is and some of it isn't.
Okay.
And that wild pattern of unpredictability is about that instability in the watershed. But if this was about discharges from permitted outfalls, it would only be up when it rained and down when it didn't rain, right? Because all of it would be coming from the treatment ponds. But as you get down to about 2009 there, you see that range of data start to scrunch together. And now all of a sudden the range is kind of 150 to 350, 150 to 400, 200 to 400. Now to give you an idea, Walter, where it should be, in the absence of mining activities, the conductivity here background should be something along the lines of 80 to 150. It
And
would be,
Johnathan, what's that based on?
ecoregion reference stream data from non-mine streams.
How did you find one of those?
It's hard, and I'm the one that had to find them. It ain't easy. If you ever want to see a couple of them that we use, I'll take you and show them to you.
I'll
Now,
take you up on that.
we have
I was gonna ask you what they were.
one of them is No Business Branch. That's along Highway 25 north of La Follette before you get to Morley, coming out of the side hollow, never been mined. One is comes out of, it's Flat Fork that comes out of Frozen Head, which is a stream that comes down beside you as you drive into the park off the mountain.
Okay.
That watershed has never been mined. Now down below the park boundary there was mining, it drains to it, but from there up it's not. So there are 2 or 3 that have had no mining at all.
No Business is the one that has like the extirpated days populations, right?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's like an old day stream.
I know that there was a record there, but it's difficult to imagine them being there because there's a cutoff. What probably happened in that population was when they built the road, they created a drop and then a drought eliminated the dace in that section,
Huh.
and they can never recolonize it again. In fact, if we took some dace up there and put them back in it, they'd probably be fine for a while.
Okay.
It's really small.
So there's no business in, apologies, what was the other stream? In
Flat Fork.
Flat Fork, okay, thank you.
It comes out of, so there are several others. Because some of the reference streams have had mining and are in real good stations of recovery where the connectivities are back down 150 or less. Because we couldn't find 10 or 12 of them with no mining at all. So that's okay. And what happens is in some of the smaller streams like no business, the natural background connectivity might be 20. As you go down and then we get to something the size of 100, 150, 200 square miles, that's going to go up a little bit. And so 80 to 150 is about the range we ought to see background if there were no coal mining. Now we haven't got that down to that here, but you can see the tightness. Now what's the difference there after 2009? I mean, our permitted outfalls haven't changed any. And what I think this is reflective of is the upper parts of the watershed being gradually stabilized and reaching sort of a breaking point or a tipping point, where a lot of these old high walls and slide things have been reclaimed gradually. And some of it is time. You know, forest growing back on places on its own. But we start to see that wildly skewing back and forth thing really starting to change. And the biological scores start to reflect that too. This is all the way down at Highway 27 bridge, actually. You know where that's at? This is over New York. This is mile 8.8, I think it is. So this is in Scott County, much, much farther down the watershed. When you look at it, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Have we switched slides?
Yes, we did. It's just, have you got this in front of you?
It says New River near Highway 27 bridge on top.
Yeah, this is New River Highway 27. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were going through. I'll say next slide from now on. You see the same pattern in the early data around 2000, but then when you get to 2009, 2010, it really tightens up again. Same pattern as above. The scale on this one's a little bit different. Nowadays, since 2010, we tend to be 150 to 250. All of them were less than 300. We're perilously close to background ranges in the lower half of New River on connectivity.
And is there mining in the area now?
There are no mining discharges near this part of the river. This is further down. The one at Stanford was definitely closer to the historic mining and the headwaters, yes.
But neither of the two graphs we're looking at reflects areas where there's current mining?
The upper one did, yes.
Yep, there is current mining.
Yeah, there's current mining on Ligas Fork.
On Ligas
There's
Fork.
the Gum Hollow storage impoundment that's above that Stanford.
Is that the one that broke a couple years ago?
The one that had the release,
Yeah.
where we find them? Yeah, it didn't break, but yeah, they released a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Don't say break. Break sounds like the dam failed. Don't say
It
that.
sounds
That
like
scares me.
Kingston?
Yeah, that scares me. The thought of that dam breaking scares the crap out of me.
Well, I was up there, I was probably under this exact bridge from the description you're
Yes.
giving of it,
Mhm.
and there was discharge material.
Yeah, so that facility, coal washing facility, that has a constant discharge is above this too, yeah.
Okay, but in the lower watershed,
There's not any discharges particularly near this spot.
but obviously what was in the upper watershed gets here.
It's going down that way, right? It's a trend thing. All right, next slide.
Are there any intervening, this wall?
Yes.
Are there any intervening discharges between the two sites?
There are quite a few. Jordan Ridge is between them. The loading tip of the washing facility at Smoky Junction is there. The mines up Smoky Creek are there, and Nix Creek are there, or in between. There are other discharges that are not coal related, like sewage treatment plant discharges from Huntsville. And of course you pick up a little bit of agriculture and other activities that you don't really see in the upper station.
And is there any silviculture?
Everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah.
Some of it pretty bad.
Do you have flow data to go along with these?
We can really relate flow data to most of it, and yes, there is flow data for almost all the Stainville ones, because I think we measure it when we're there. The Highway 27 stuff you can get straight off the internet, off USGS's webpage. I don't have it on the graph to show you, but yes, you could relate it to flow. What you'll find is some of those higher ones, especially at Stainville, that are up near 700, were at low flow, not at high flow. Some of that represents how much bed load of old mine spoil is actually in the bottom of the river in prior times, with this kind of hyporheic flow in the bottom of the river channel moving through that stuff. Some of it's in-channel influence too.
Johnathan, I just want to make sure I understand what you just said. Are you saying that in the new river at Stainville, there are old mining spoils in the river?
I'm saying there were.
There were.
Mhm. There's still some.
Okay.
Nothing like it used to. We're going to get to that in a minute.
Okay.
Next picture, next slide is a pretty river picture here. This was taken about a month ago, right downstream of that Highway 27 bridge. What you see in this picture is riffle run, riffle run, riffle run pool, with bars of cobble and boulder on either side. The fuzzy stuff going on the right side bars is justiciya beds that are the native material that should be growing on those bars. And what you cannot see in the picture is in the pool in the distance, it's not full of mine spoil. It's bedrock and boulder shelves and layers. Well, what's remarkable about this is exactly what the habitat should be in New River at this location. This score is very high on our habitat scoring for fish and aquatic life. And it's all native substrate with the native pattern that should be there. Now, that may not be remarkable to you, but when I first saw this river in 1990, it did not look like this. My first view of New River in 1990 was all mine spoil covering the bottom of the river from top to bottom. It was, during high flow, a big rolling muddy mess. During low flow, it was exposed bars of gravel to sand size material that was mine spoil, and it was large proportion of that mine spoil was gob or unreclaimed coal pieces, things like that. At low flow, it was like braided bars with the river braiding among it. Now what used to happen is during low flow, when the weather got pretty like in this picture, the locals would go out onto those spoil bars and make campfires and have parties and things. And there was so much gob in the mine spoil that it would light and start to burn. And it didn't go out. And this pall of coal smoke would hang over the gorge for days. And it wouldn't be extinguished until it rained and the river rose over it and put it all out. Now, I'm not talking about 1960 here. I'm talking about 1990. And one of my bucket list things that I wanted to see before I died was natural habitat back restored in New River with people kayaking on it, fishing on it, catching smallmouth and things like that. And I thought maybe as an old man I might get to see that someday. But instead, I'm seeing habitat that would score the same as if there had never been mining here in the lower part of the river 24 years later.
And you're not an old man.
And I'm not an old man yet. I'm knocking on the door, but they hadn't let me in yet. I get mail from AARP all the time, but I don't open it.
You gonna put any mussels up there?
We can. That's TWRA's call, not mine. Let me show you some things here. Now, we went there this day, and what I wanted to get was some slides of river diversity for this non-biological audience I was going to see, engineers and coal miners. And I didn't want to put metrics of how it scored up for them. I wanted to see pictures of what we're talking about. We're talking about diversity. So this was a little bit for entertainment value, so don't be offended by this. I'm not trying to make this into a 6th grade science thing here for you. This is just a picture of me. This is next slide, I'm sorry. Of me wearing the backpack shocker to show them how we collect the fish. You guys are familiar with this. You've got two 12-volt batteries. They're linked in sequence. You've got probes that go in the water. You've got an adjustable thing where you can control how much current you put in the water. and you can stun the fish with electricity without killing them, get them out and look at them, and put them back alive into the river.
What does that weigh?
40 pounds maybe.
I don't-
It's not bad. You can wear it all day, it's okay. It's not any worse than backpack on your backpack. So what do we, now we're not doing a real survey here. This is not going to be scored or anything. This is just fooling around for 30 minutes to get some good shots. And every fish that I show you here was a fish that we collected that day, laid in a ceramic pan, and took a picture of it right there on the bank. But the guy that we had doing the pictures for us is really good with the camera, so we got some good shots. So we found the usual things a fisherman or recreator would look for: smallmouth bass, rock bass, and every time I say a fish name, I'm going forward on the slides here for you. First fish is a smallmouth bass, Walt.
Got it. Thank you.
Next one, rock bass, the one with the great big eye and the bar pattern. Rock bass is a good sign. Rock bass are intolerant to habitat incursions because they like the big spaces in these big rocky pools. If they fill in with mine spoil, they don't have those holes they like to be in, so big rock bass disappear first. So if you get rock bass greater than 5 inches, it counts as an intolerant fish in the score. The pretty orange one there is, we got different kinds of native sunfish that showed up that day. This particular one is called a long-ear sunfish, and the males turn very beautiful colors.
And this was October?
Yeah, this is just a month ago. And again, I want to stress, this was not a full survey where we're trying to go out and get scored and do the whole thing, do all the habitats. This is just trying to get some cool pictures to illustrate to this kind of layman's audience what I'm talking about when we talk about diversity of river health. This is a greenside darter. It's a real common inhabitant of riffle, the shallow riffles and runs. Next fish with the red spots on its side, Walt. It's called a blue breast darter. It's not that big. It's really about 3 inches long at best. Now this is very significant because this was by far the dominant fish in those riffles that you saw in that photograph, in those shallow wadable riffles. Because the blue breast darter is one of the more intolerant fish that we have in the drainage. They're the first ones that disappear with pollution or turbidity or sediment load. We could not have found the blue breast darter in 1990 or any of these things. Back then biology was almost shot because the habitat was almost all gone. So to find this one in great numbers there at this time is a good sign. Next fish, it also has red spots on its side, but the real red fins, it's called a blood fin darter for obvious reasons. Another riffle inhabitant that's pretty intolerant. Now, when I say these things are there, I want you to understand what we're talking about. I don't think the public understands how many untold millions of these things make up a stream ecology. If I stretch a 15-foot net across that current to block it off, and I stand upstream of it, and I walk back and forth with the shocker over about 20 feet in front of it, that'd be 300 square feet, right? 15 times 20. And all the fish that get stunned are swept down into this net by the current. There are, in any square meter of this, dozens of these fish. Most of them, these darters hanging out on the bottom, but there's a mated pair of them every so many inches. And they live on the billions upon billions of these macroinvertebrates and insect larvae that live on these surfaces, which in turn graze on the periphyton that grow on the rocks in the sunlight. There's a whole ecology to it that's very complicated. But when I do this 300 square feet, I might get 150 fish in that one net. And I'm only getting a fraction of the ones that were in that 300 square feet because they don't all go into the net and they don't all get shot. It's only a subsampling of what's there. But if you walked out into this riffle with your sandals on and look down, you might see a couple of fish skitter away. And that's all you would see. It looks empty to your eye until you're there with this kind of gear. That's something that sometime, we'll talk about this later, I wonder if you guys wouldn't like to go out and do and see.
I would love to.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah, and
Maybe when it's warmer.
yeah, we don't want to do it in the winter. It's a lot harder to collect them in the winter too. A lot of the fish move into deeper water and kind of go a little torpid. So we want to go in the spring. We want to go like May. We want to do it. But it might be illustrative for some of the members to see how this data is collected and what, you know, what it's good for and what it's not. It doesn't tell you every fish that's in a reach that you're doing. It's totally a subsampling of the ecology that's there. It's not intended to, like I say, the only way to get every fish of every species in a given reach would be block it off and poison it. And that's a little bit self-defeating, to say the least. That's the way they used to do things, wasn't it?
So the park did that.
Yeah, the park did.
Count the corpses?
Yeah, that's what they used to do. They'd block off a representative, what they said was a representative sect. They'd poison every fish in it and go count them and go, oh, now we know what's in here.
Yeah.
This guy with the stunned looking expression where he's running to my shocker is called a rainbow darter. This is one that's where the fish sitting in my hand, Walt.
Okay.
This is probably the most common fish in this drainage naturally, and this includes all the tribs too. The bloodfin darter, for example, we found in the larger streams. Oh, did we lose him?
I don't know what happened. Walt?
Okay, now, the phone beep.
Someone's calling me, but we'll
Oh,
just ignore
okay.
that.
The beeping is somebody trying to call or ignore. I thought the you cut out on me, sorry. But this rainbow dart will be found in all size tribs up to very small all the way to the main river. And it's pretty, like it'd be in the pools, on the edges of the riffles, in the runs. You find this thing everywhere. It's making a huge comeback as water quality is improved. So in places even like Davis Creek, where we've got a little bit more, come on in, Dave.
Hey.
When we're done here and lights come on, I want to introduce you to everybody.
Hey, how you doing, Ace?
We're seeing these rainbow darters come back in huge numbers. Like when we were doing a little survey like this on Davis Creek, downstream of all the mines on Davis Creek, it was all of a sudden full of rainbow darters that we hadn't seen 20 years before. Right, this is a rare fish. This is a federally threatened listed fish called an ashy darter. Have you ever heard of this one? It doesn't come up in association with the mines as often, Stephanie, because it's a big river fish. It'll be found near the lower sections of all these larger tribs, and it'll be in the main river, but it won't be up at this Blackside Dace kind of territory. It's much farther down than that. But if we go into Montgomery Fork in the lower mile or two of it, Beach Grove Fork, Smoky Creek's full of them. The lower few miles of Smoky Creek, these things have made a big comeback and are very, very common now, but it's a very rare fish. This is one of the many different kind of minnows we collected that day. And unlike darters, all the minnows look exactly the same. They look small and silver. And you have to have some expertise to tell them apart. I could teach you different darters in a few days, and you would begin to recognize them without too much trouble. Shiners take a lot of time and some professionalism. They all look alike, but this particular shiner is called a rosy face shiner. It's got a great big eye, see that? And this is another intolerant fish that's listed deemed in need of management by TWRN. This was the other dominant fish in the runs that day, full of rosy face shiners. That's a good sign. The big eyes, because they're sight feeders that feed on small crustaceans and things in the water column like ostracods and copepods, things like that. In clear water, they're sight
Yeah,
feeders.
so
They
they
can see them from distance. One of the first things that disappears when the turbidity goes up because they can't sight feed anymore. So, another good sign in the lower river there. All right, next slide.
So can we step back a minute? 'Cause
Yes.
I think, the question for us that I'm interested in is, what specifically is the reason that we have the better water quality and we have all these fish in these watersheds? And I think that may be where, the difference of opinion could come
Yes.
in, but.
Yes.
So,
Did you hear the question, Walt?
Yes.
Okay.
I guess my first question is, did anyone ever go into the New River and remove spoils, or did they just get washed downstream?
They're just getting washed out, but I think we're coming to that, and that question is exactly what I'm trying to answer here too. So
Okay.
bear with me a minute, and then we'll ask the question again at the end.
Okay, sure.
Okay? All right, next side is Clear Fork of the Cumberland River. This is probably the most heavily mined big watershed in the state historically. And the headwaters in Kentucky are much more heavily mined than any place in Tennessee's ever been.
I don't have any more slides.
It might be,
Some slides.
it might
Please
be,
continue with the presentation, but just understand I don't see anything.
All right, I'll help you out.
Walt, did you get one that had 4 parts or just 1 part?
I think it just had one part.
Oh, I sent you the wrong thing then.
Please continue, don't worry about me. I
Okay.
just wanted you to know I'm not seeing stuff.
Okay, good. When you get lost, let me know.
All right.
And most of our active mines and the mines that have come up recently are all, of course, in Clear Fork drainage, generally.
Although there are a couple in the New River.
There are a few in New River. Clear Fork is still listed impaired due to siltation and also from E. coli. The E. coli has nothing to do with mining, that's straight pipes and things. People up there don't have sewage systems and live in trailers next to the creeks and things like that.
It's not cattle.
I'm sure cattle have a factor, but there's not enough cattle in the whole watershed to add up to too much. All right, we got a similar graph, Walt, about conductivity. It's going back to 2000, similar to the ones on New River. Same crazy pattern early on. Now, we don't have as many data points from here as we did from New River, so it extrapolates a little bit more. But again, when you get from 2009, something like that on, we tend to stay below 300. We got one data point there in 2010 that's above 300, but the rest of them have been below it. And this is at High Cliff, which is before you get to Jellicoe, as you go downstream from all the mining areas. Again, same pattern, crazy at the beginning, tightening up as we get in the last few years. Next shot is a picture of, go ahead, Walt.
I have the slides now. I
Ah.
have the slides now.
Okay. I just left the graph of Clear Fork at High Cliff and went to a photograph of the river.
Got it.
Okay? Just real quick, the same thing here is in New River. This is meant to be a shot of current habitat. Now this is not at High Cliff. This is up near where Straight Fork comes in, up around Clearfield.
When was this picture taken?
This picture was taken during a sample that we collected in June of this year.
Okay. Yeah, it's a recent photo.
Yep.
And what you see here is kind of what we were illustrating before was the fact that it's not full of mine spoil in uniform coating of the habitat anymore. You've got native substrate of cobble and boulder. You've got pool, riffle, run, pool. The pools are deep and are swept clear. They're not filled in by the things anymore. We've got improving habitat conditions. Clear Fork is not coming along quite as fast as New River, but it's following the same trend.
But it did score a TMI score of 34 at that location. That's part of our 106 sample.
Okay. Tackett Creek is a trib to Clear Fork of the Cumberland, and I believe, there's a picture of Tackett Creek, Walt, and then I'm moving on to an aerial map of Tackett Creek.
Okay.
And outlined in red is the Tackett Creek watershed in Claiborne County and Campbell. And it's probably safe to say Tackett Creek is the most heavily mined sub-watershed. Just about every contour on every slope in Tackett Creek's been mined at one time or another, and there's still ones being proposed there today on the same contours, on the
And
same
being
high
mined.
walls. Yeah.
Now, but there's also thousands of acres of underground mining that's recharging Tackett Creek.
That you can't see in the pictures.
No.
But if you go there to middle and lower Tackett Creek today, I moved on to a photograph, Walt. This is the habitat you see there today, which is cobble, boulder, not mine spoil again. Habitat has come back, and all this old mine spoil, as Stephanie's asking, has moved out. No, nobody went in and dug it up. But what that does tell you is they're not replacing it with the same bed load today.
Right.
And that means something's going right for us, right?
So where's all the
Yeah.
bed load going to?
On that Lake Cumberland, I would say.
Cumberland?
Yeah, Cumberland River,
Until it hits the first dam on a big river where it can't migrate any further.
Wolf Creek Dam.
Next shot is a hard to see survey, fish survey from Tackett Creek at that location in 2011. And it's just an illustration of again, ecological recovery going on. This was a real survey. This wasn't just playing around with the shocker for a day. With a real score. And it scored, I think, fair with 18 native species and 2 intolerants and all the things you would expect to see at this location. And this is kind of fish community support in the most heavily mined third order stream trib that we've ever had historically and current too. Does that mean it doesn't have any problems? No, I'm not saying that. It's saying that Tackett Creek's perfect and we don't still have work to do? No. But there is a level of use support that's much higher than what the public realizes in these streams below all the active and the historic mining. You could go swim and fish in Tackett Creek. And this is pretty good. This is if there had never been any mining in there and I had longer to survey, I might get up to 22, 23 species, Dave, I'm saying.
Yep.
But I wouldn't get any more than that if there'd never been anything there.
Well, another thing is TWRA has, I think they discontinued stocking rainbow trout, but they were stocking rainbow trout in the upper sections of Tackett Creek but there was I don't know if there was like a sort of a controversy of they were stocking Stinking Creek and they stocked Tackett Creek, but on Stinking Creek there was a landowner issue as far as the people were thinking that since the creek flowed through their property, that those were their fish. And
Yeah.
they could do whatever they wanted to.
And also Tackett Creek, since 2006, I think, has always scored as fully supporting when you do the macroinvertebrates, we do the normal biological assessment. With a climbing trend, last 2 times in a row, it scored 36. 32, Walt, is fully supporting. Anything above that's good.
Okay.
We do not have a grading system like Kentucky does, Walt. We don't have severely impaired, poor, fair, good, excellent. It's pass, fail. You're either fully supporting or you're impaired.
Right.
If we got a really, really bad score, sometimes we would call it severely impaired. As a judgment call, it would be perfectly logical, but we don't have gradations of good and bad.
It's still impaired.
Impaired's impaired.
I've seen the term slightly impaired used.
Yeah, that's old, but it's not used anymore.
Oh, okay.
We did have severely impaired, slightly impaired, moderately impaired, slightly impaired, like you say, and then we had fully supporting and excellent. Now, you're fully supporting or you ain't. Yeah.
You're either pregnant or you're not.
Mm-hmm. So that brings us to Stephanie's question, I think, which is I'm showing you some evidence of improvements over the past 20, 24 years. What accounts for the improvements? And I believe that it comes down to 4 different things. And I'm on, you see the slide I'm on, Walt? What accounts for the improvements is where I am.
It might be another separate document.
Got it.
Okay. I got four bullets there. The first is better permits, better operations. There's no question that nowadays, as opposed to 1987 or something, we write much better permits. And the operators do a much better job of controlling mine drainage and doing the mining than they did before. The reclamation has come light years since then. The requirements that we put in the permits, we're better totally. OSM, TDEC, and the mining community is better at doing a surface and underground mine than we were in 1987. The second has to do with things you're familiar with, just the general decline in Appalachian coal. We're not being begged to mine as much as we do. We don't have as much mining as we did. Tennessee never has had the resource that Kentucky and West Virginia and Virginia have. We've got a fraction of the coal here. Where we do have coal, it's not as rich, the deposits aren't as thick, all those things. It's never been the same issue here as it has been in those states, just from the nature of the resource. The third is what we talked about before. Some of it is time. There are places that haven't been reclaimed and were left in bad shape. Landslides stabilize, forest grows back on them, drainage patterns get reestablished on their own. Some of it is the world healing itself in the way that it does, and it hasn't taken as long in some areas as many of us had feared that it would. But I think the most significant factor in these data improvements that we've seen is the implementation of this macro reclamation. The methods of doing the reclamation have improved. They get better at it all the time. We learn from past mistakes. How the material's handled, how it's sequestered, how it's put back into the contour, how we establish drainage back over it, the forestry replanting techniques, the compaction, and we used to over compact it so much that it was hard to get things to grow on it. We're doing better at that. And the execution of it on the site by the operators as they get better at it continues to improve all the time. And I'm gonna, next slide, Walt. We're gonna use some examples on Spruce Lick Branch, which is a heavily mined tributary to Tackett Creek.
And that's where dates were found this year.
Yes. There were dates found in Upper Spruce Lick for the first time this last year. All right, next slide is an aerial photo, Walt. You can see that the heavy contour mining in the Spruce Lake watershed. This is 1970 something.
73.
There's underground mines, there's contour mining, there's ponds and discharges, there's fills and things. This is pre-SMACRA, pre-reclamation kind of stuff. You see the line here going through the middle from upper left to lower right. You can see Spruce, the blue line of Spruce Lick Branch coming down like this, headed toward Tackett Creek. Now, as we go on through the 90s here, this is late 90s, we've got an impoundment in the middle of Spruce Lick Branch, which remains to this day. We've got big hollow fills up there in the center red. We've still got discharge things everywhere, and you can see the concentric lines here heading out towards Spruce Lick, where fill material has been placed in this hollow and continue to come out, right, Dave?
That's a coarse refuse.
Yeah, refuse area.
This is a slurry impoundment district.
And this
Been
green
reclaimed.
line here is where Spruce Lick is today.
Right,
That's the blue line of where it was.
right.
And basically, this spoil material was just pushed out over Spruce Lick and just buried it. They eliminated Spruce Lick Branch.
That's right.
Now, the point here that I'm trying to make is we did about everything bad to Spruce Lick that you can do to a stream in a mining thing. And it was not anything that would ever get permitted now. This is ridiculous. Now, you guys have seen plenty of high walls in your time left behind by contour mining. And what happens when you do cross the contour is it intercepts the wet weather conveyances in the streams that are coming off above it, that were flowing down these hollows, and now they hit this high wall and they get hijacked. It goes onto this high wall and it goes wherever the high wall goes, right? I've gone forward these few slides here to one of the stream going through weeds. Well, as the high walls intercept these stream drainages, they get redirected going down the high wall through all the old ponds and spoil piles and exposed material that's been left behind by the old mine. They're picking up pollutants as they go, and they're no longer flowing down the hollow where they were originally going. People are driving through them, they're cutting through this stuff left behind on this old mine bench. And eventually they hit the low point on the mining bench at some point, and they go off the bench, off the side of the mountain. And the first thing they hit is all the overburden and spoil material that was thrown off the side of the mountain that was on top of the coal in these historic days before they had many controls on them. And it's eroding through all that loose material, mine spoil, that was thrown off the side of the bench. You can see the erosion channel there, and there's another.
Well, you can see a lot of vegetation, and you see this vegetation, but that vegetation is holding quite a bit of that material there, but it is, as you can see from the photograph, it's cutting and transporting tons of material.
And the growth on it gives you an idea of the age of this spoil that was cast over, this cast over material that's been there for some time.
Right.
But water's still sinking through it, coming out the bottom, and it's being washed away constantly everywhere along all these contours at the tops of all these mountains.
Right.
That's where all the bed load was coming from,
Right.
Stephanie. That's the source material for everything you see down in New River, that you see down in Tackett Creek, that you see down in Smoky Creek.
Mhm.
It's what's washing off these high elevation points where the intermittent streams and the wet weather conveyance are, and it's been going this way for decades. And that's where all this stuff came from. And it's where most of our pollutant load comes from in the streams. The connectivity, the sulfates, the sediment, the iron is all coming off these old bench and old spoil areas, and we've left it in such a condition that we're running all the water through it. Now what happens when we go back and someone goes to these old high walls to do a new mine on the old high walls? And all of the surface mines we have nowadays are doing that. We don't have anybody proposing a virgin cut into a place that hasn't been cut before, draining to streams that don't already have mining drainage going to them. It's not necessarily true of an underground mine, but the surface mines are all like this. They're all going back to the original high walls that were left behind and getting coal with modern equipment that they couldn't reach before, right? Now, as part of the SMACRA permit, and as part of our permits, they have to, as they go, put it back to original contour, even though they were not the ones who cut the original high wall there.
If there's available spoil.
Yeah, as much as is possible with the available material.
That's correct.
And sometimes it's very possible, other times we
It's
don't
not.
can't quite get it all,
Right.
because there's just not enough material left behind to fill it in.
It's all down in
But
the region.
fortunately, what happens is there's an expansion factor, where once you break it up into all the spoil and rubble, it's bigger than the original, and you can't fit it all back in there, so you get a volume. The volume, like when you dig a hole in your yard to plant a tree, by the time you dig it all up, it doesn't all fit back in the hole
It
anymore.
fluffs up.
Yeah, it fluffs up, exactly.
Swill is.
Yeah. So you see in the distance there, the dip in the mountainside there where this wet weather conveyance or intermittent stream would cross in this hollow, where it was being intercepted by the high wall. Part of what we do in our permits that dovetails in with what OSM's doing with the SMACRA reclamation is reestablishing this stream channel over the top of the spoil to put it back into its original hollow.
Right.
And that's the channel they're building right there. And every time you encounter one of these dips, whether it's a wet weather conveyance or a stream, we have to put this back. We don't want the water sinking into this, picking up the pollutants and leaching out the bottom. We want all the clean water to pass over it. We want all the rainwater that falls onto it to flow naturally off the mountain as close as possible to what it did before it was mined.
Where is this?
This is one of the upper livers to upper tribs to Spruce Lick.
Right, this is a Polyfuels Buckeye Springs. This is Buckeye Springs surface mine too. Early on, I mean, it looks like it's fully reclaimed now. That section.
To give you an example of one, it doesn't look like much when they first get the contour restored. The stream channel there looks just like a rock-lined ditch with whatever native materials laying around that we can make this out of. The important part in this really intermittent part, it's going to be dry most of the time, is that it be stable and that it go in the right hollow and we don't wash away any of the reclamation. Not so much that it has great stream habitat per se.
This
Priority
one,
one is stability.
this one's a little different because the way this is, this drainage is gonna be passing through, okay? The drainage in the channel is really up gradient drainage, and it's not getting the site drainage at this time. The site drainage is still being directed to ponds. As you see the eroded
Now, all
rills.
that's coming down into the pond.
Right.
And there's another pond on the other side on the right.
Correct,
And this is getting the stream from the undisturbed top of the mountain past all of those.
right.
Now, this is the same place 5 years later. Or, no, that's not true, 7 years later.
Yeah.
And you're starting to get some forest growth on it. And then this is what it looks like today.
Mhm.
Now, the illustration here is pretty simple. If you go back, and we're at the slide now, Walt, that says 2013 at the top.
Got it.
If you go back to those old high walls, and this is just a random picture of a high wall, it's not the same high wall that was there, but the point is, I think there was something like 500 acres that went along with this piece of reclamation here. But if you just took what was in the frame of the shot, the amount of material that used to flow off this as a bare high wall and the cast over material that was being eroded and passed down to the system, both pollutant load and sediment tonnage, is in the tons per year. And every one of these things that intersects one of these high walls is doing the same thing all the time. And there's our major source of all this. And when you get this reclaimed, you put this back to almost natural bed load transport. Now, you haven't yet got to the point where there's no chemical load coming off of it. It's much, much, much reduced from what it was before the reclamation. But yes, the conductivity here, or whatever sulfates and things, that not all the water can be kept from sinking into this material and coming out somewhere else. So there's still some of that goes on. And the trick with it is time and getting this forest established on top of it so that the forest behaves the way it did pre-mining. That the water falls on the forest, the trees soak up most of it, the rest of it's going in real shallow interflow zones across the surface into the stream straight without going deep into this stuff and coming out somewhere else.
That's right.
So this is the same mine, the Apollo Fuels,
Yeah.
Buckeye Springs Surface
No,
Mine?
no, this is Buckeye Springs, this is Horseshoe Mountain Buckeye Springs.
It's
So now
still,
we're Horseshoe
it's a different
Yeah.
headwater of Spruce.
Right, it's,
Further on around the curve.
right.
So,
It's still
And-
going to Spruce Lake, Stephanie. We're showing you apples to apples here.
okay. Sorry, which one is this one again? I just,
Horseshoe Mountain,
Horseshoe.
Spruce
Right,
Lake.
yeah, Horseshoe Mountain Buckeye Springs
Oh, sorry.
The one with the dump truck was,
okay.
was just Buckeye Springs. Apollo Fuels Buckeye Springs Surface Mine too.
And if I understand what you're saying, is that the reclamation that you just showed us was something they were required to do for their new mine?
Not for the new one, for this particular one.
Right, well, for all SMACRA.
And all
Yeah.
of them are gonna be the same. This same requirement applies to all of these surface mines in these Ohio.
Now, these were not the forestry reclamation approach. These were, you have quite a bit of compaction on those. This was before, this mine, this permit, both of these permits were issued prior to the new forestry reclamation approach.
What that
Reclamation.
means is the same concepts will be applied to the new permits, but better methods, even
Right.
better methods.
The better methods with the FRA approach is what Johnathan was talking about. It speeds this whole process up.
We grow better forests faster
Right,
If
And
they
waste
have
them.
the amount of fill material to do the reclamation.
if you have enough to work with, yes.
that's right.
Otherwise, they just leave it as is and.
Or they fill in as much
Much as
contour as
they
they
can.
can with what they've got.
Right,
Some of them are half, if that makes any sense. Like you have some material which you don't have enough to do it all, so instead of doing the entire thing back, it might only come out part of the way, which is still better.
You can still reestablish the drainages.
right.
Yeah, and you can still reestablish the drainages over them, and you can still get that water off the high wall and off the slide zones.
And this may be an ignorant question, but do they actually remove the high walls, or do they just redirect the stream to around to avoid it?
No, this
Backfill.
was high
Backfill.
wall.
They backfill it?
Yeah,
Backfill.
Okay.
all this was a high wall chopped off.
Okay,
And it has
okay,
been
so it gave it,
backfilled.
it gave it a more gradual contour.
Yeah, they
Right.
put the
Okay,
contour
okay, all
back.
right,
Yeah,
that's-
absolutely.
thank you.
They'll
No, I'm
take
glad you
those-
asked because I take some of these slides for granted. You're right.
They take those trucks, those
Okay.
wiggle tails like that, and they'll pull them up, and then they'll end dump them, okay? And then they'll take the dump, this is a pretty short grade, so basically they'll end dump it, and then they'll run dozers over it, okay? Now, if it's an acid toxic material area, then they'll put that material in the back, okay? There'll be a pod back in here where it'll be high and dry.
At the landfill cell.
Right. Be like a pod of high and dry toxic material, then they'll loosely dump that material and have one pass of dozers over it.
If
So this is where they take the old spoils and
Plus anything they generate as they do
plus
some more
anything
digging.
they generate.
Right.
So that's also part of their current spoils disposal
Yes.
Right.
technique, because they can't put it all back where they take out of the new spot because it clumps up.
Yeah. And the hotter, more acid-producing stuff, you put it in the center and keep it where the water doesn't hit it and the water doesn't flow through it. And it goes cleanly underneath it, what water you have. You try to sequester it like you put stuff in a landfill. We used to
But there's
compact
no
it.
lining or anything.
No, it's just high and dry. But it's compacted, okay? It's gonna be compacted, in a compacted pod of material that would reduce the probability of oxygenated water accessing it.
Yeah, what you don't want is water and air.
You don't
That's
want,
what turns this stuff
Oxy-
into acid and metal, is water and air. All right, Walt, now I'm at one that says 2008 at the top and has a big rock channel in it.
Got it.
And we require ARAPs if these things are streams and not weather conveyances. Do what?
Aquatic Resource Alteration Permit.
I'm sorry, Walt, I just talked Tennessee speak to you.
Yeah.
Tennessee doesn't rely entirely on the Course 404 permitting for physical alterations of streams. We have our own program that is not related to or authorized by the federal program. It's one of the few states that has it. So if you're going to do an physical alteration to a stream or wetland in Tennessee, you've got to get an aquatic resource alteration permit from the state to do it that's completely separate from the Corps' requirements.
but it can serve as a 401
And
certification.
we issue it usually as the certification document for the 404, if that makes sense. But we are not bound by the 404 regulations. It's not about fill material placed in waters of the U.S. It's about physical and biological alterations to waters of the state.
Correct.
So we can usually go much farther in some ways than they do. Like you could drain a wetland without putting fill in it, and it might not even require a Corps permit, depending on how you interpret it. That wouldn't be true of us at all. Ours isn't based on fill material placed in waters.
And you also use it for water withdrawals.
Yeah,
That's true.
just about any kind of physical alteration that we can make a tie to, we can do under a, and so we call them ARAPs, because it's easier than saying the long-winded thing. So, along with this reclamation, if there's a stream involved, they're going to get an ARAP from us to do stream restoration. Here's an example of a channel of a really, really intermittent stream, I think, but still a stream, being established over this new contour that's been put in place.
That's the same channel that you were looking at with the truck, very near it. And if you'll notice, it's humped up on the side, so you don't get the drainage from the site through that. And that's through OSM. OSM, they said, okay, if you put this rock line channel in here and you don't, that water has got to go through a pond. I said, no, it doesn't have to go through a pond because it's really not wastewater. You're just transporting it through the site. So what the OSM's required them to do is to hump it up on the sides, and then in post-mining, after the site's fully established, we can break that drainage up to where you can get the site drainage, some site drainage, but it's a minor amount of drainage.
Yeah, so even though this is in reclamation status and there hasn't been any active mining going on at this location, we still have NPDES outfalls that still have to be monitored, that still have to meet limits and things like that. And by designing it like this, we're trying to not commingle clean stream water with wastewater that we're still handling under the permit. We do
And
not.
sorry, I was busy writing, so I want to make sure. But you're saying after reclamation, like the phase 2 bond release, and they no longer need a NIPI's permit, would they change that channel so that?
They can.
They can.
They can.
If it's hydrologically advantageous to us to do it at that point, if it's better for the stream, we can do that.
Okay.
Typically, we don't. Because you do more damage than good.
Now, we don't spend a lot of our effort on these particular permits trying to recreate great stream habitat. It's really, and obviously, and the premium is on stability and these really, really high gradients not washing the reclamation away. We got to get this high energy water from one side to the other without damaging the work we've done and without picking up the pollutants. But and they're really interesting. This is something that would flow, you know, a month in February or March out of the air, and it's dry most of the rest of the time. It's a stream. It's right on the edge of not being one. But what you find is, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I didn't say.
Oh, I thought I saw your hand wave.
Did they take the silt fences out?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah, this is still early on. You got fresh grass growing.
Cassick,
And this is a few years later. It's 2012 as it's starting to stabilize and green up. Still, all it looks like is a rough rock channel. It doesn't look like it'll just run a stream out of it. But what you see, I'm at the slide where you can see the water flowing through the channel there, Walt. Kind of a close up of water.
Is this the one with 2012 or,
yeah.
It's the following slide.
oh, 2008, yes.
No, that's the previous slide. Go to the following slide, the one after 2012.
There's just a little bit of water.
2012.
Yeah. What happens is with these real high gradient channels we build, that the gravity, because they're laying like this. They're laying at, I don't want to say 45-degree angles, but they're pretty steep. What about are we talking about here? What kind of slope are we talking about here?
Probably,
10% or more? 20?
yeah, 20.
Yeah, they're very steep. And so what happens is the action of water and gravity transforms those rough-looking channels we showed you previously into the step pool that you would normally get there in a few years anyway. So we don't waste a lot of design and construction effort on making that habitat. It's going to make itself in a few years. So it works out better this way. Very difficult to get it right. Now we do often go back to a channel required in one of these ARAPs, inspect it and say, now we want you to work with us on the habitat on this. We had one of these not too long ago.
Right. Well, it was an individual permit that required step pools, and the Corps had bought into our permit. In other words, they said, you will put 5 step pools in this reach. And if you don't have 5 step pools, the Corps is gonna make you go back and put, if you have 3, you gotta add 2 more. So, and we told them, I said, okay, here's your chance. I mean, you're in early phase of channel establishment, thus, this is the time to do it. And so the company went back, Apollo went back and it properly installed their step pools and did a great job.
All right, next slide, Walt, is an aerial map of Spruce Lick. You got it?
I'm getting to it, go ahead.
Okay. This is Spruce Lick as it lays today. Overall watershed. You still got the impoundment in the middle. That's the green polygon, or whatever you want to call it there. You still got this old fill of coal refuse.
Right.
You still got discharges and ponds that's still in place. But the upper watershed has stabilized up around where all this reclamation's been going on. And that's where the DACE are now, and it scores above 32 on the biological, even though the connectivity is still high in this particular one. You still got the impoundment in the middle, and that's where they found the DACE, is in this upper part above the impoundment, Stephanie. And then below the impoundment, the green line down below, Spruce Lick has, through no good works of our own, has reestablished its own channel, moved over to its new location. And it looks something like this in the lower reaches now.
But can you go back one slide, please?
Sure.
In the area that's the ETW now,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to have outfalls from the Sterling and Strays mine, is that correct?
Can you show her where on that map that would be roughly?
Well, okay, so this is the county road
Mm-hmm.
that you're looking at. And so that falls, there's gonna be one there, one in there, to go into Spruce Lick. So Spruce Lick, this section in here would be the section that they're gonna buffer around, which is above the county road. And their ponds are gonna be beach ponds like that.
All right, Walt, in your picture there, there's a neon green dot at top center.
Yep.
That's where Dave was indicating roughly where the outfalls for this new Sterling and Strays mine would be.
Okay,
Just to give you some orientation there.
thank you.
Now, there's gonna be, I think, there's gonna be two directly to Spruce Lick, and then I think one to an unnamed tributary. I think that's correct. I can't remember.
There are a lot of outfalls, it's hard to keep track.
Yeah. And let me say this for Walt's benefit. We have lots of outfalls on these surface mines in Tennessee, and the reason is, in Tennessee, we don't have mountaintop removal and valley fill over the stream adjacent, and we don't have any in-stream ponds that go in streams below that. You can't put any fill over a stream, you can't put any in-stream treatment ponds. So we try to get a whole lot of little ponds with little sub-drainages all up as near the disturbance as possible that intercept everything before it gets to a stream. So instead of having one giant pond built in the stream that takes up half the valley below you, we have a lot of little bitty bitch ponds that are just precipitation driven near the top of the mountain that cover every little tiny piece of drainage. So you might have 27 different outfalls going around this contour. Most of them not active at one time. They're starting at one end and crawling along the contour, so these 3 ponds are built now. The other ones won't be built till you get there. By the time you get to pond 15, ponds 1, 2, and 3 will already have reclamation around them, and it kind of moves as you go, crawling along the contour. But that's an intentional strategy. We'd rather have 27 outfalls that rarely discharge, that are right by the disturbance, and we can isolate the effects of this one little piece of mining in that subwatershed from the rest of them, than do the way they do it in other states where we know we can't protect water quality that way. Don't tell the other states I said that.
Well, I do think everyone in this room couldn't possibly disagree that Tennessee does have better laws in terms of preventing the valley fills. And
Yeah.
that really is a blessing.
Yeah,
That puts us ahead of other Appalachian
when you
states.
add that to the Smackler reclamation on these things, that's where I think the improvements are coming from. And clearly, we're not replacing the old bed load that we've washed out with new bed load all the time. We've got some success going at reestablishing this normal sediment transport through the system that gives us the natural habitat that we're supposed to have.
Right.
The sediment load going through one of these high-gradient systems isn't zero naturally. It's the natural erosion rate off steep slopes, steep forested slopes. There's still gravel and cobble that move through these systems all the time. We just want to get it back to that natural rate.
Well, there's
It can't be
entrainment
zero.
too.
Yeah.
There's entrainment as far as bank, as far as stabilization and equilibration of the hydrodynamics of the stream itself. When you go in and you modify those drainage patterns, then the stream is going to react as far as, and it's going to try to reach an equilibrium as far as the stream stability, the geomorphology of the stream. And as a result, then it's going to move back and forth. And as it moves back and forth, it's going to pick up bed load from the banks. And it's also going to try to downcut. If you're trying to keep it at an elevation, that energy is going to it's going stable. It's going to get stable one way or the other, whether you like it or not. No matter how big a rock you put there, it's going to move it.
Just a couple more slides and we'll take a break for a minute, okay? I'm at the slide that says Spruce Lick Arrow Darter Reach. And you got the new reformed channel of Spruce Lick, and on the right is this fill material, the edge of it that was coming out and encroaching and pushing Spruce Lick over, and you even see some iron seeping out of the base of that.
That's the only iron left from the consolidation coal area.
And in this reach below the dam there, aerodarters have colonized on their own and are all through this reach, and we're starting to get natural habitat and biological use support.
The thing to think about is that the Cumberland Blacksite days, I mean, they cohabitate with your chubs, your creek chubs, because they use the creek chub bed for its spawning bed. And then, so what do you think the creek chubs eat when these fry hatch off?
And
Day eggs.
And the eggs.
they eat days fried, they said. Next slide says reclamation is working. Walt. what I was trying to say to this crowd was, I don't need to tell you, OSM and coal operator, that you've just reclaimed X thousand feet of highwall. You can see that for yourself, or that you've reestablished a stream channel. What I wanted to show them is how the money they're spending up here at 2,000 feet elevation in the intermittent section, how that's starting to pay off miles downstream in the Big River where people float a kayak and go fish for smallmouth. And it's starting, the cumulative effects of all these acres being reclaimed gradually over the past 20 years, it started to show up in the data down here. There's a context for all this. I wanted to encourage them that what you're doing means something. It's not just a regulatory requirement for this 500 acres. It's something, the SMACRA requirements are about restoring watersheds and watershed usages. They're not about the high wall.
Well, they are, too.
Well, they are, but there's a bigger context that was meant.
Yeah.
And when you do enough of it in a watershed, just the same way as we tore them up 100 acres at the time, we're starting to see the recovery 100 acres at a time. If you do enough of it, it starts to show up down here.
That's right.
And really, it's really about the bed load and this hydrologic regime that Dave's talking about.
Right.
Because you're lowering pollutant loads, you're lowering sediment loads, and you're stabilizing these slopes and channels. And as you do that, the streams themselves down below, where the real aquatic life and recreation takes place, go back to their normal pattern of flow and transport.
That's right.
We're not tearing up banks anymore. We're not flooding as much. Everything starts to stabilize itself. We get natural stream habitat 5 miles away from where we're working as a result of the work that we do up here. We've got to continue to fill in that dotted line in between the two.
That's right.
Now, why we're doing it and what we're trying to achieve, it isn't working or not. So, Walt, I suggest we do this because this has run kind of long. We'll let everybody take a break here, and then we'll come back and they can ask whatever questions. And then after that, they wanted to hear about our abandoned mine land reclamation programs from Trevor, because they don't know much about that. So why don't we take 5 and come back in a few minutes, okay?
Why don't I hang up, and when you're ready to start again, why don't you call me?
Okay, be fine.
Does that work?
Yeah,
He has to call in.
No, he's on my phone.
Oh.
thanks, Walt.
Bye.
Well, that worked good. You had plenty of battery.
I charged it up before I came because I figured it's always a backup plan.
What's your long distance race?
I don't talk that much. Thank you.
Well, I saw your article in the paper.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're gonna have a Thanksgiving dinner with Ron Shree.
Hey, it's Stephanie. We're going to get started again. Can you hear us?
I sure can.
I'm going to put you back next to Johnathan.
Are you in FaceTime also?
No, it is possible to Skype on that phone, but that's too high tech for me.
Well, I don't know how familiar you are with Tennessee as opposed to Kentucky and West Virginia.
And Walt's actually, you're in Virginia, right?
Yeah, Virginia would lump in with that well too. There's one mine in. Okay, gotcha. The real difference here is what I was saying before about the mountaintop removal, valley fill, in-stream treatment things. And by not having that here in Tennessee, and it's not that we're so doggone progressive compared to them, and they're barbarian. It's just the politics of coal allow us to get things like that passed and enforce them here in a way that would never fly in West Virginia yet. And we just don't make enough money off coal in Tennessee for it to be the biggest economic player here. In fact, coal swings almost no political sway anymore in Tennessee. So, yeah, they have enough to pay one good lawyer, I think is the way it goes. But
I'm going to keep my mouth shut.
okay. But as a result of the way we've done it in Tennessee, for whatever the reasons, you can do something here that I don't think you can do in Kentucky and West Virginia, and that's go to a stream below an active permanent mine and have fish and aquatic life use support right there, you know, a mile, 2 miles, right below the outfalls of these things. And I don't believe you can do that in Kentucky where you've got a hollow fill and a chain of ponds built in the stream and then go downstream of the last pond and take a sample of fish and aquatic life and water quality and say that that's gonna meet water quality standards like we can here. So we've got a big leg up on that, mostly because of the resource and political realities here. Our biggest fear with some of the EPA's initiatives and the way things are going is that we get lumped in with their practices when we don't have their practices. We like the way we're doing things in Tennessee, and we see water quality getting better and water quality getting protected, and we think we're out in the front of that in Eastern coal. And we don't want to get lumped in with whatever war they're going to have with Kentucky over Kentucky's practices. We're not doing those practices. So that being said, what questions do you have, or what do you want to talk about what we just saw?
I have one question about spoils, because this has actually come up before. So, since they can't do valley fills, and since, as we said, I forget what better terminology you all use, but this stuff fluffs up when you blow it up. I know there are refuge areas, like Jordan Ridge, and then on a number of lines, there seem to be smaller outside refuge areas. Is that where the extra stuff goes? It doesn't go back where it came from?
Look,
You do a lot of hollow fills.
we have really little head of hollow ones that can't go over a part that's a stream. It has to be way above the part that's a stream. We can't put any fill over a stream.
Typically now, on the new sites, the remining is they use bench fills. They place, like the mine, like on Sterling and Strays, they're using an area on a bench on an adjacent permit to put their first cut. You just have to put your first cut. I mean, that's all you got to place there, is your first cut. Once you've made your first cut and you've placed that material, then you have got rooms to move.
You're moving along, filling behind you, mining in front of you. You just have something to put the first part, and so they're using another old bench. And we usually need the material
Right.
to make contour. We usually don't have extra to get rid of. Now, someplace like Jordan Ridge and thing is not getting rid of spoil
No.
that was overburdened.
No.
That is coal processing, where you take the coal to a washing facility, clean all the stuff you don't want off of it, and then that material that's left over when you've got the clean coal out has to go somewhere. That's what Jordan Ridge or this Gum Hollow branch is. It's a slurry impoundment for the coal washing refuge.
Okay. I want to go back to what Axel was saying on the head of hollow fills, because I mean, we do have a better law than other places, absolutely. But to me, the gap is, a wet weather conveyance. And, as you know, we spent a fair amount of time familiarizing ourselves with those procedures and, I won't go into areas of disagreement, but the reality is you can fill wet weather conveyance, which is something we might think of as the headwater stream.
Yes.
So that's the one place, that's a gap there.
And here's what I would say to that in practical terms.
Yeah.
And your argument in general terms, the answer to that is yes, absolutely, that's true. When you get into the elevations that are right near the tops of the mountains, and we go look at them with the Corps at the same time.
Right.
The guy from the Corps who's identifying what's waters of the U.S. and what's not, and the people from the state that are saying what's waters of the state and what's not, are there at the same time in a concerted effort.
And usually the mining company consultant would be there too.
Yeah, they want to see, because if we call the stream, they have to skip it and go around it. They're extremely concerned about where because you're not just saying yes, no, you're saying it starts here. And that's where it gets really dicey. Everything downstream of my foot is a stream, and everything upstream of my foot isn't. And there's how many tons of coal under it that lie on that determination.
Well,
So
plus
yes,
they
it
have
drops
to
it off.
stay 100 feet away from it,
Exactly.
other than road crossing.
Exactly, so they have to stop there, cross over it, resume on the other side. And they can't dig or fill within 100 feet.
Or put a pond.
Right, can't put a pond in either. So, what you find when you get these high elevations is the point at which the Corps says waters in the U.S. start, and the point at which we say waters in the state start, usually don't vary by more than a few feet. And the reason is, in that terrain and elevation and climate, it takes so little drainage to make a channel that equates to waters of the US as ephemeral, that the difference between the point where we put our foot down and where they put their foot down, sometimes it's not any difference, and sometimes it's only 50 feet.
But waters of the state would generally go downstream?
A little bit
Where
further
waters of
downstream,
the US
or
would be?
exactly the same,
Okay.
in these elevations,
Yeah.
in these conditions. Now, if you go into Middle Tennessee and it gets flatter, sometimes where we say the stream starts and where the core says, they might be hundreds of feet farther up. The
Right.
farther west you go, the more true that is.
Right.
So what I'm saying is, in practical terms, of these top of the mountain surface mines, the difference between what the Corps is saying, what we're saying, is virtually not any. Because when you get enough drainage to make a defined channel, it almost always come out intermittent stream and waters of the US ephemeral at almost the same point. When you get down lower elevations and you move farther west, it really starts to change.
They would have to have a 404 permit to fill that section of stream. That they're the difference. It's not a no permit situation. They would have to have a 404, so we would have to certify that 404 permit.
But they're allowed to do that. and the
They are
Corps
allowed to
happy
do
give
that.
those permits.
Yeah.
And
that-
that's
that
what
would
we're
be
calling the
consistent.
head of hollow, is that,
Right.
so we have the same terminology.
Now,
But I can't think of one recently where the Corps is letting them do this over waters of the US, and we're saying it's a wet weather conveyance, not a stream. The calls at these high elevations, like I say, are so close on top of each other.
there,
It really doesn't create a real discrepancy in real world terms.
no, it really doesn't.
In these situations, hardly ever.
And you're only talking a very few feet in that situation too. So as a result, the mitigation, the only difference is if the Corps issues a 404 permit or requires a 404 permit application, then we would have to look at that also and to certify, and then we would be looking at the mitigation, and there would be mitigation which may be offsite, not just onsite. And so, either way, the watershed, you may lose a few feet on the upper, but you would gain in the mitigation within the subwatershed area. There's gonna be mitigation requirements for the Corps, and then we would piggyback right off of that.
In the same subwater?
Yep. Yep.
So what pump
What
number?
counts as a sub-watershed in that context? Dave?
Well, the only difference is like for wetlands, you know, like when we get into the wetland thing, and we're looking at we're looking at these pits that are on some of these mine sites that have wetland characteristics. As far as we're concerned, they're like beaver impoundments, basically. That the beavers that come onto these old pits and dammed it up. And the Corps is calling this open water and fringe wetlands. So they don't have to mitigate for the open water. They only mitigate for the fringe wetlands. Now, when you get into that situation, you can't mitigate on site. Because we don't want those old pits up there on those areas that are,
We don't want water and hydrology perched on top of this pool, that's what we're trying to get rid of.
we're trying to get rid of that. And so we don't want that. And so as a result, then the Corps, and as far as the banking is concerned, we're certifying the Corps permit, which allows them to mitigate outside of that area. Okay? They'll still be in the Cumberland drainage, but
So usually they just put money into the mitigation bank, don't they?
right. It's the Tennessee Mitigation Stream Program or something, you know, I don't know.
There's the TSNP and the TMSP, and I can never keep them
I
straight.
get confused too.
Okay, all right. This, starting in straight, let me say this. We've done this 2 times, okay? And
all the years that I've been doing this, 2 times, Clinton Quarry, because there wasn't room to do anything there, up there at I-75, and Sterling and Straits, because there's no room to do anything down, there's no room on the ND.
You mean, by this, you mean doing
Allow-
mitigation for
Off-site
wetlands
mitigation.
off-site?
Yeah.
Off-site
Okay.
mitigation, that's what I'm saying.
Well, and I don't wanna go into too much discussion on wetlands, just, that's,
We don't do streams though. Streams are, they're in there, they're in the subwatershed. We do not go outside.
Now, I'll say for Walt's benefit that the definitions of what's a stream and what's waters of the state in Tennessee are in statute by the legislature, not our interpretations of regs from TDEC. Legislature has said to us, this is what a stream is, this is what a wet weather conveyance is, and we will have to follow the law as the legislature writes it.
Right.
I will just say that the level of effort in identifying macroinvertebrates can have a big impact on whether you determine whether something's a wetland conveyance. or
Sure
a stream.
can.
And some people look harder than others, but
And-
let's,
Yeah.
but that's not what we came here to talk
Okay,
about. So
go ahead.
I guess, you know, the big picture, I mean, to me, the New River and the Clear Fork are 2 very different places. I mean, the New River seems like it's just a lot further along in recovery.
It's ahead, I think.
And yeah, there are some new surface mines being proposed there. I know of 2 or 3 from Clear Energy, are the ones that come to mind. There's one right outside of Rosenton. There's one inside the Lung area, the Lung, the petition area. So, you know, we have concerns about those that are a little bit different, I think, from our concerns about the Clear Fork mines, you know, which I would sum up as, it's doing well, just leave it alone. You know, I mean, it's actually, it is doing well. I'm not up there as much as other folks, but I mean, just looking at the numbers you showed us, and that's pretty consistent. You know, that area is pretty much recovering. Why mess with it again? In the Clear Fork, you know, and I don't want to get into the specifics too much now, because we'll have other times we can do that, but, you know, you've got a lot of ongoing surface mining, you've got 3 huge proposed new mines, and as you mentioned, there are the underground mines, you know, both active and pre-law, you know, unclaimed underground mines. So, I mean, they're really 2 different situations. In the Clear Fork, and maybe this will go into the next part of this conversation, I would be curious to know, like, how much of the reclamation that has happened there has happened because of new mining permits versus how much has been done, you know, by OSM and by TDEC without new mines. Because obviously, you know, I think, well, I know TCWN would like to see reclamation, you know, but it's really hard for us to swallow the idea that the only way we get reclamation is by getting a, you know, new 2,000-acre surface mine. That doesn't, you know, new mining just doesn't strike us as a way to fix, you know, old violations.
There's no question, it's a hard thing to say to a room full of citizens that show up with. What they see is we have a history of impacts from historic mining, and you want to allow yet one more. From our standpoint, many of these situations, because they're all going back to these old high walls, what we're saying in these notices of termination is, it's already mined. The pollutants off the historic mine are going into the stream now if we do nothing. We think if you do it this way, you get this many thousand acres that are reclaimed that otherwise wouldn't get reclaimed. And with the modern permits and controls, it doesn't get worse while you're doing it. It can definitely get better in the long run. So we don't have, since the degradation's going on now, we don't have degradation to weigh against social and economic and try to figure out this impossible situation for all of us. How many pounds of manganese equals 35 jobs? I don't know how to do that. I'm not going to pretend I know how to do that. You know, I'm glad Devin's not listening to me say that, right?
Well, I don't feel comfortable going too far down.
To go down that road either, but I'm telling you, but you need to understand the basic position that we're coming from and why we say it. Not to agree with it, particularly one way or the other, but understand that there's a basis for it that makes sense at some level. You should just consider this data a status report. That you can see in it what you want to see, but that's a status report of where we are in the arc of coal mining, in water quality in Tennessee right now. It's a snapshot of it that might be useful to you. To segue into reclamation, almost all the reclamation of all these old high walls is done as part of reclamation at the new permit. And we also have programs, like all states do, for abandoned mine lands being reclaimed, and we have funding that goes into those programs. So it's not a new permittee who owns it, or the old person who tore it up. It's abandoned land. There is no owner that we can go back and do this. And so that's a completely different animal. Trevor Martin here runs this program for the state of Tennessee, and we get $3 million from the federal government to implement in reclamation every year. And without stealing his thunder, I think it's safe to say that you can't do a lot of high wall reclamation with $3 million a year. So if Trevor will give you a little rundown of how the program works and how that money gets spent and how it's administered, that will give you an idea of how that works. And I'm going to set the phone over by Trevor for you all.
Just, I guess, a few background numbers, and these aren't set in stone. These are inventory numbers from early '80s. Most of it. We have over 1,100 abandoned mine sites in Tennessee, totaling over 34,000 acres. The money we get from OSM, $3 million annual grant, has to be spent on what OSM calls high priority health and safety abandoned mine problems. Most environmental problems associated with abandoned mine lands are what they consider priority 3 problems. That's not to say we can't spend the grant money on priority 3, but it has to be a project that we're doing, we're reclaiming a priority 1 or 2, a high priority health and safety site, and it happens to have some environmental problems associated with it, then that's permissible. Just to go out, and most of these old abandoned high walls, they don't qualify as a priority 1 and 2 unless there's someone living in close proximity to them, or if it's causing a landslide below it. In years past, we did get a little bit of state money for construction, and we had a lot more to do with that. We use that to get matching money to do priority 3 projects, to try to do more environmental water quality projects, but that money has, through several budget cuts, that money is gone.
How much were you getting?
It varied. It started when back in the early '80s, when we first in Tennessee had Thomasy, it was about $1 million to put the state money up. And that's just like I said, every budget cut seemed to find us, so there's not any of that left now. The last few years we had around 300,000, which we would, like I said, we would try to find some people that want to match funds with us, and we can go further. QRA is good to give us some matching funds.
TWRA?
Yeah, some of the sport fisheries fund.
Can you give us a definition of priority 1 and 2?
Yeah, a priority 1 problem is a high wall plus proximity to people. They consider an extreme danger to public health and safety.
Is somebody going to fall off of it? Is somebody going to be on a 4-wheeler going through the woods and all of a sudden find themselves going off a cliff that they didn't know was there? That kind of thing.
There's a landslide below it.
That'd be a bad thing, but.
There's a landslide below a abandoned mine bench blocking the road.
Open mine shafts near where kids might play.
Yes, slides threatening homes or public buildings. Priority 2 or similar to that, just not as immediate. Priority 1's like an immediate thing or something that's going to happen on act right now. Priority 2 is there's a high potential for danger. Priority 3 would be more like old high walls, spoil banks, out in remote areas. Clogged streamlands, which we, for other reasons, aren't allowed to work in clogged streamlands. But those would be a priority 3 problem. Acid mine drainage is a priority 3 problem. Environmental, anything that's environmental impact. with that 3 million, we end up usually having about around 2 million available for high priority projects and for water line projects. We've done a lot of work extending water lines to communities where their wells were impacted by
Water line.
water lines. Extending, we're getting ready to do one for Super Flats area. We've done a lot in Stinking Creek area. Just running water to people where their wells have been impacted by historic flooding. We're also able to do a little bit of work on the water system, like Ecological, where their system has been impacted by historic flooding. We can help them with some water system improvements. We're getting ready to do a project with Ecological to help them replace their the gate valve and valves like that because of the corrosiveness of the mine water that were running through their system. Deteriorated the infrastructure of the water system. We did one up in Jellicoe, there was a landslide below the water tanks. So, but the majority of the work we're doing is probably in the south Fulfield, the large area mines. We're planning, last year we probably planned around 200 acres right there. That's probably average year for us, between 2 and 350 acres of reclamation. Filling in old pits, trying to reestablish the drainage so this water's not pooling on these benches or in the area around the creek.
And that most current data you got is from the 1980s?
Well, this is the, in the 1980s, there's a big inventory effort. They had a lot of manpower to go out and map all of the abandoned mine areas. We have been underfunded and short-staffed much since then, so we're kind of relying on where those are. We're hoping to, we just did a pilot project with the state to get LiDAR in 2 counties, Impaired and Ecological County. And that, you see LiDAR data that creates a really good contour of the whole county. We can pick out the non-sites, especially the high walls, just like that on those, and that'll make our job a lot easier as far as updating our inventory and prioritizing what sites we need to get done first. And hopefully getting ready. We got some good results from Member and Ecological that we approached them again and said, hey, we'll do another pilot for Scott County, so we'll have that LiDAR out for Scott County hopefully this coming year. And the idea being that we're using AML funds as it helps us. It's a great savings to us because we can look at any site in those counties and have maps on it. But hopefully the idea is also to get other groups, government agencies to see this and see what a resource would be to them and have them chip in some money too and get the whole state mapped this way. It would be the mapping of the accessible to anybody.
A year or two ago, I guess it was, that the AML fund had $70 to $80 million sitting in it. Is that still correct, or?
Yeah, well, when SMAC roads were authorized in 2006, I'm not an expert on this, but I know a little bit about it. When SMAC roads were authorized in 2006, it took AML funding off budget, where it was at the discretion of the Congress to say, yes, we know you're due this money, but we're going to let you have this much money. So all of it, over the years, states are building up this unpaid balance. What 2006 reauthorization did, it took the AML trust fund off budget, where there's a formula and each state gets this money each year. And Congress can't say, we're going to take 75%. Now, a lot of states that had this backlog they didn't get, they called that prior balance, and they got that over, I think this is coming up for last year, they doled that out into 7 or 8 years and gave a little bit of that at the time, and I think this upcoming year, the last year, they get those prior balance monies. Tennessee was not in a position to get that because we weren't a promising state. We had a reclamation program, it was a state reclamation program, and we would identify on a site-by-site basis. We would go to OSM and say, hey, we want to reclaim this site, and they would give us a cooperative agreement to reclaim that site. But we weren't recognized as a federal reclamation program. 2006 reauthorization changed that and said Tennessee is now considered a minimum program state, so we're guaranteed that minimum $3 million per year as long as we have high priority abandoned mine properties.
But Tennessee's not sitting on a big pool of funding for that. Now, does OSM separately get money for reclamation in Tennessee?
Not much. They might get some civil filling money to work on a specific site, but they,
Well, they get so much per ton on all the surface mine coal, and that goes into the reclamation fund. Then there's so much underground per ton that goes into a reclamation fund. Now, that's smack, that's, that's not Tennessee, but that's, and then there's counties get, severance tax money, from the mining and the coal. But, there is I think it's 25 cents a ton, or 35 cents a ton, or 50 cents a ton, or something like that. It's for, the SMACRA fee that goes into this big pool of money, this reclamation pool,
The national fund.
the national fund.
In each state, 50% of that money that Tennessee collects goes back to Tennessee.
Right.
And then part of that is also there's a historic, based on the historic mining of the state, you get so much of that money back. And then a little bit ends up with what's in our program. And also, part of our grant too, we're able to set aside to place it, as long as you have an interest-bearing account, you can put it into an asset non-drain set aside. We're able to put some of that money back. We've done a lot of asset non-drain treatment, like in Bear Creek, Wilder, Sanford Creek, and Allen County. And those, it's been about 15, 20 years since we did that, so that's why we come up here soon, having to be beefed up or renewed. So that money we're able to set aside from our grant, and hopefully use that for projects like that.
All those acid mine drainage treatment systems are passive treatment systems, and they have to be replaced. The anoxic limestone drains, or they're great as far as for passively treating acid mine drainage and constructed wetlands. But, there is a life to the, to the anoxic limestone drain and to the constructed wetland. It has to be go back in and reverse.
And the funds that you have, are you not able to use them where there's an identified program?
The majority of the work we do is on private land, it's at the mining. The companies that are long gone, or they're one of the American druggist insured places where they want to belly up to the bond, forfeited for no good. Most of those are pre-law mine sites. A lot of it doesn't, it never had a permit, or pre-law, pre-SMACRA permit. So they're eligible for us to spend annual money. I would also say too, about all the miles and miles of high wall up the river, Clearfork. If you think about it, if we went in there to try to reclaim that, most of that material was passed way down the mountain, is vegetated now. The cost for us to go back and get that material and put it back up where it came from would be pretty astronomical compared to if you had opportunity for a remining and generating material on site. That would be much more